The boots that never stopped walking John Wayne's haunted Riverside Ranch. When people think of John Wayne, they picture the swagger of America's most famous cowboy, the slow drawl, the wide stance, the eternal shadow of a man larger than life. But what many forget is that Wayne didn't just play cowboys on screen, he lived like one. Out in Riverside County, California, tucked between citrus groves and the dusty trails of the Santa Ana River, he owned a sprawling ranch that he loved more than Hollywood itself. The ranch was quiet in the daytime, horses grazing lazily in the pastures, a barn filled with saddles and leather that smelled of sweat and dust, wooden fences that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was Wayne's refuge, a place where he could escape the press, the endless interviews, the artificial glitter of Beverly Hills. Yet, even during his lifetime, whispers among the ranch hands began to spread. They said there was something uneasy about the place after the sun dipped below the horizon. At night, the ranch changed. The wind cut colder through the mesquite trees. The creak of old wood echoed across the porches. But the sound that unsettled everyone the most was the boots. Slow, heavy, unmistakable, the sound of a man's footsteps pacing back and forth outside the bunkhouse. At first, the hands assumed it was Wayne himself, checking on things, keeping watch. But when they stepped outside with lanterns, no one was there. Just empty dirt paths leading off into the dark. The boots always came back, usually after midnight. A steady rhythm, like someone too restless to sleep. Tap, crunch, drag. Over and over. After Wayne's death in 1979, the ranch was sold, but the footsteps never left. The new owners complained of hearing a man's weighty stride across the gravel, stopping just outside their bedroom window. Dogs would bark violently at nothing, their hair standing straight, refusing to move closer to the unseen presence. A caretaker once claimed he was woken by the sound of spurs clinking against the wooden deck. But when he ran out, the boards were perfectly still, coated in morning dew with no trace of a footprint. Locals passing the property late at night sometimes reported something even stranger: the silhouette of a man on horseback, slowly riding across the pasture. Broad shoulders, a wide-brimmed hat, sitting tall in the saddle. He would appear just long enough for the headlights of a passing truck to catch the outline, then vanish into the fields as if the desert swallowed him whole. Skeptics dismiss it as imagination, but for those who've worked the land, the explanation always feels simpler. John Wayne, the man who became America's eternal cowboy, never truly left the range. His boots still walk, his horse still rides, his presence still lingers. And if you ever find yourself near Riverside, on those long country backroads with only the moon above you, listen closely. If the night is quiet enough, you just might hear it: the slow crunch of boots in the dirt, pacing back and forth, searching for something only he knows. Because legends may die on screen, but on his ranch, the Duke still walks. Laughter in the orange groves. The ghost of Carole Lombard at Clark Gable's ranch. Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood, was a man who seemed untouchable on screen. He had wealth, charisma, a sprawling San Fernando Valley ranch where he could play at being both a star and a farmer. But beneath all of that, Gable carried a wound that time never healed. The loss of his wife, Carole Lombard, in a tragic plane crash in 1942. The Encino Ranch was supposed to be their sanctuary, a place where the glamour of Hollywood couldn't intrude. It was a working property, filled with rows of orange groves, a sturdy white ranch house with wide porches, and stables that smelled of hay and earth. Neighbors often said that in the early years, they'd hear the sound of laughter drifting through the trees, Lombard's voice carrying like bells on the wind. She was mischievous, light-hearted, always able to pull Gable out of his brooding moods. After she died, the ranch grew heavy. Gable spent long nights drinking alone in the barn, staring at nothing. The laughter that once filled the groves fell silent, or so people thought. It began subtly. Workers tending the orange trees claimed they heard a woman's laugh, quick, sharp, almost playful, though no one was there. It didn't sound like the laugh of a stranger. It carried a familiarity, a warmth that tugged at the memory of Lombard. A field hand once dropped an entire basket of fruit when a woman's voice whispered something in his ear, though the grove was empty. Inside the ranch house, things were stranger still. Light bulbs flickered for no reason, particularly in the sitting room where Carol and Clark once entertained guests. A maid reported seeing a glass of bourbon slide across the table on its own, as though someone invisible had nudged it closer. Dogs, loyal creatures to the last, would often stop in the middle of the grove paths, staring into the distance with their ears pricked, then begin wagging their tails at empty air, as if greeting someone they remembered. But the most chilling stories come from those who stayed overnight. One couple who rented the property decades after Gable's death recalled waking up to the sound of a woman laughing softly outside their window. At first they thought it was a neighbor, until they remembered the house sat alone, surrounded by acres of fruit trees. When the husband pulled back the curtain, he swore he saw a flicker of movement in the orchard. A figure in a pale dress darting between the rows, gone as quickly as she appeared. Some say it's nothing more than echoes of grief, the weight of Gable's sorrow still clinging to the land. Others believe Carol returned to the only place where she was truly happy, with the man she loved. Her laughter, frozen in time, a reminder of a Hollywood romance cut short. To this day, the groves still carry her presence. On certain evenings, when the wind rattles the branches and the air fills with the sharp scent of citrus, those who pass by claim to hear it. A burst of laughter that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. It's not cruel or frightening. It's playful, almost teasing, like someone still trying to lighten the mood of a grieving cowboy king. And so, in Encino, the oranges still grow, the shadows still lengthen, and Carol Lombard's laughter still lingers, echoing through the groves she never truly left behind. The guitar that played itself, Gene Autry's haunted Studio City ranch. Gene Autry wasn't just a cowboy on screen, he was the singing cowboy. His voice carried across radios in the 1930s and 40s. His songs became American standards, and his wholesome image made him beloved by millions. But off-screen, Autry had something else. A beautiful ranch in Studio City, tucked in the hills not far from the heart of Hollywood. The ranch was a slice of country life in the city horses in the stables, a wide white house filled with cowboy memorabilia, and a music room where Autry practiced for hours. Those who knew him said he loved that room more than anywhere else. He'd sit with his guitar late into the night, strumming songs, humming melodies that would someday make him famous. That was his sanctuary. After Autry's death in 1998, the ranch changed hands. The horses were sold, the grounds modernized, but the music room remained. And with it, something else. The first reports came from caretakers. They'd lock the house at night, making sure every door was shut. Yet, as they walked past the music room on the way out, they would hear it, the faint twang of guitar strings. Not a full song, just a few notes, plucked slowly, as if someone were testing the sound. When they opened the door, the room would be empty, the guitar hanging untouched on the wall. Other times, the sound would grow bolder. A progression of chords, even a familiar melody from one of Autry's classics. Always at night, never in the day. One worker swore he heard a full verse of Back in the Saddle Again, drifting through the air, though the radio was silent, the guitar unplayed, and the room completely empty. Neighbors began to notice things, too. From their yards, they'd sometimes catch a glimpse of light in the window of the music room, long after the house was dark. A soft golden glow, as if someone had left a lamp burning. But when checked, the lamp would be cold, unplugged. Then there were the animals. Horses stabled nearby would panic without reason, whinnying and kicking at their stalls. Dogs barked at the music room window, their hackles raised, yet wagged their tails moments later as if recognizing a friendly spirit. One of the most unsettling stories came from a young couple renting the house for a short time. The husband woke one night to the sound of strumming, faint but clear, echoing through the halls. He got up, followed it, and found himself in the music room. There, in the faint light of the moon, he swore he saw it. The guitar resting on its stand, strings vibrating, playing themselves without a hand to touch them. When he reached for it, the sound stopped. The strings fell silent. He never slept easily in that house again. To this day, the legend remains. Some say it's just the wind, or the settling of an old wooden frame. But others, especially those who grew up loving Autry's voice, believe he never truly left his beloved ranch. His spirit lingers in the music room, still strumming, still singing, still caught in the rhythms of a cowboy's heart. And so, late at night, if you pass through Studio City and listen closely, you might hear it. A faint guitar melody drifting on the wind. A reminder that the singing cowboy still has one last song to play. The white dress in the desert, Marilyn Monroe's Palm Springs hideout. Marilyn Monroe was more than a movie star, she was an icon. A living symbol of glamour and tragedy, wrapped into one fragile figure. Everyone knows about her Brentwood home, where her story ended, but fewer people know about the desert hideout she kept near Palm Springs. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't polished for photographers. It was small, quiet, surrounded by date palms and pale sand, the kind of place where she could escape the suffocating spotlight. Locals remembered seeing her there in the early 60s, walking barefoot across the patio in the heat of the afternoon, her hair tied back, a drink in her hand. She laughed with friends, played records late into the night, and seemed, for a moment, like any other young woman trying to catch her breath. But the desert has a way of holding on to memories. And when she was gone, the house didn't stay quiet. It began with a smell. Chanel No. 5, her signature fragrance. Guests reported it filling the house suddenly, strong enough to make their eyes water, though no bottle of perfume was ever found inside. It would appear most often at dusk, just as the last pink glow of the sun faded behind the mountains. Then came the figure. Several visitors swore they saw her, a woman in white, drifting between the date palms, always at the edge of sight, never close enough to touch. One man described her as moving like smoke, her dress flowing without a breeze. She'd appear for seconds, then dissolve into the shadows of the desert night. Inside the house, strange things happened. Mirrors fogged over in the dry desert air, as if someone were breathing across them. A bedroom door would shut by itself, softly but firmly, as though a hand guided it closed. One renter recalled hearing the faint sound of crying in the bathroom, a soft, muffled sob, only to find the room empty. But the most haunting story came from a woman who stayed alone one weekend. She said she woke in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps across the tile floor. Slow, deliberate. She turned on the lamp, but no one was there. The smell of Chanel No. 5 was overwhelming, almost suffocating. As she sat frozen, she noticed the curtain by the patio door swaying, and in the reflection of the glass, she swore she saw Marilyn herself, standing just behind her, face pale, eyes heavy with sorrow. By the time she turned, the room was empty. Locals in Palm Springs still whisper about that little hideout. Some believe Marilyn comes back because it was one of the rare places she felt free away from contracts, cameras, and endless demands. Others say her spirit is searching, restless, drawn to the quiet she never found in life. And so, in the desert, where the wind whistles low across the sand and the stars shine cold above, her presence lingers. A white dress moving between the palms, a perfume heavy in the air, a reminder that even in death, Hollywood's brightest star still haunts the shadows of Palm Springs. The leather jacket in the moonlight, James Dean's unfinished desert ranch. James Dean was the very definition of restless youth. Fast cars, faster nights, and a career that burned like fire before it was extinguished in an instant. Most people remember the wreck, a stretch of highway near Chalem, California, where his Porsche Spyder met its end in 1955. But few know that, just before his death, Dean had been in talks to buy a secluded desert ranch not far from that same region. It was remote, rugged, the kind of place where the silence of the desert presses in on you. Sparse mesquite trees, dry earth cracked beneath the sun, and an old ranch house sitting lonely against the hills. Dean wanted it as an escape somewhere he could ride motorcycles across the sand, fix cars in the barn, and leave Hollywood behind. But the papers were never signed. The crash came first. And after that, the land seemed to take on a reputation no buyer could shake. Stories began almost immediately. Locals driving those desert roads at night reported seeing a lone figure standing by the fence line. A young man in jeans, a cigarette dangling from his lips, shoulders hunched beneath a leather jacket. His face shadowed, unrecognizable, but his posture, his aura, unmistakably James Dean. He never waved, never moved, just stood there, staring into the moonlit desert until the car passed. Others spoke of hearing the distant growl of an engine when no cars were around. A low, throaty roar, like a sports car winding through gears. One rancher claimed he heard it outside his window at 3 a.m. The sound of tires spinning in the dirt, but when he rushed outside, the land was empty, silent, the sand undisturbed. As years passed, the ranch house itself developed a reputation. A group of teenagers once broke in on a dare, camping inside for the night. They told of hearing footsteps pacing in the upstairs hall, though no one else was in the house. One swore he saw a leather jacket draped across a chair, but when he reached for it, the jacket dissolved into nothing, leaving only the smell of cigarette smoke behind. Caretakers hired to maintain the property never lasted long. One left after a single week, claiming he woke to the sound of a man's voice whispering "go" right into his ear as he slept. Another reported seeing a figure crouched by the barn, working on something in the dirt. He thought it was a trespasser, but when he approached with a flashlight, the man leather jacket, cigarette glowing faintly vanished into thin air. To this day, the property remains a patch of haunted desert land, scarred by what might have been. Some say Dean's spirit lingers there because it was meant to be his refuge, a place where he could finally breathe. Others believe it's tied to his violent death nearby, the unfinished business of a young man who left the world too soon. And so, the ranch sits in silence, the wind whipping over the sand, the moon casting silver shadows across the dry earth. But if you stand still long enough, you might catch at the sound of an engine revving, a cigarette burning in the dark, and the faint outline of a leather jacket glinting under the desert moon. James Dean, forever restless, forever searching, still haunts the ranch he never called home. Songs in the Sand, the haunting of Frank Sinatra's Palm Springs compound. Frank Sinatra's life was built on contradictions. He was both a dazzling performer and a man of dangerous temper, a host of glittering parties and a figure shrouded in secrecy. While his Beverly Hills mansions became famous, it was his desert hideout in Palm Springs that carried the most stories. Hidden behind high walls and guarded by palm trees, the compound was both playground and fortress, a place where Sinatra entertained, argued, and disappeared from the world. The desert nights there were legendary. A-list actors, politicians, even mobsters walked through those gates. Champagne poured, music blared from the record player, and the pool reflected nothing but laughter and light. But when the guests left, something stayed behind. After Sinatra's death in 1998, caretakers reported strange disturbances almost immediately. Empty rooms rang with muffled conversations, as if arguments were replaying themselves. One worker swore he heard a man and woman screaming at each other in the main living room, the voices so sharp he thought intruders had broken in. When he entered, the room was dark, cold, and silent, yet the faint scent of cigarette smoke lingered in the air. Guests who rented the property for private retreats spoke of waking at night to the sensation of being watched. One woman described hearing soft music playing in the distance, a swing tune from the 1940s, though no stereo was turned on. She followed the sound into the courtyard, where it stopped abruptly, leaving her in complete silence beneath the stars. Even more unsettling were the whispers. Several people claimed that, as they drifted off to sleep, they felt someone lean down close to their ear and sing a single line of a song. Never the full tune, just a phrase. A male voice, smooth but chillingly intimate. One man bolted upright after hearing the words, "I've got you under my skin," only to find his room empty, the windows shut tight. The pool area seemed especially active. Workers cleaning in the mornings often found lounge chairs moved, though no one had touched them. Some reported hearing splashes in the water at night, as if someone had dived in only to discover the pool still and perfectly calm. A few swore they saw a figure walking along the edge of the water, tall, broad-shouldered, a cigarette glowing faintly in the dark. The most chilling story came from a caretaker who stayed in the guest house. He woke to the sound of a man singing softly outside his window, the lyrics barely audible but unmistakably Sinatra's voice. When he pulled back the curtain, He saw only the desert sand and the swaying silhouettes of palms. The voice cut off suddenly, leaving the air heavy and still. The caretaker quit the next morning. Locals say Sinatra never fully left his desert fortress. His life was tangled with secrets, regrets, and unfinished feuds, and the compound became a stage for echoes of all of it. Arguments in empty rooms, songs that drift without a singer, shadows pacing the poolside, cigarette smoke rising where no one stands. And so, the Palm Springs nights still hum with his presence. The desert wind carries voices, the pool reflects more than it should, and every so often, a faint tune drifts across the sand. Sinatra, the chairman of the board, forever haunting the house where the music never really stopped. Engines in the dark. Steve McQueen's Santa Paula Ranch. Steve McQueen lived fast. He was a Hollywood rebel, a man defined by motorcycles, race cars, and a hunger for freedom that never seemed satisfied. Away from the sets and the chaos of stardom, McQueen found his escape in a ranch near Santa Paula, California. There, he kept horses, worked on cars, and tried to live as far from Hollywood's glare as he could. The ranch was quiet by day, wide pastures stretching into the hills, a rustic barn filled with tools, engines, and the smell of grease. McQueen spent hours there, shirtless, cigarette hanging from his mouth, tinkering with machines until his hands were black with oil. For him, the barn was more than a workshop. It was where he felt alive, in control, away from everything but the roar of an engine. But after his death in 1980, the ranch became something else. The land changed hands, but the new owners soon realized they hadn't inherited just a piece of property. They'd inherited something far heavier. It started with the sound. Late at night, when the house was dark and the valley still, the barn would come alive. The growl of an engine turning over, sputtering, revving, as if someone were tuning it. Lights flickering under the cracks of the barn door, shadows shifting inside when no one was there. The owners would rush out with flashlights, only to find the place silent, tools neatly hung, cars untouched, dust unmoved. One worker claimed he saw more. While walking past the barn one night, he caught sight of a man crouched by the hood of a car, lit faintly by the moon. Denim jeans, grease-stained hands, the glint of a silver wrench. When he called out, the figure straightened and in that instant, dissolved into the darkness, leaving the barn empty. The horses seemed to sense it, too. Calm during the day, but restless at night, kicking at their stalls, eyes wide with fear whenever the engines began to hum. Dogs refused to enter the barn after sundown, barking furiously at the doorway, tails tucked low as if they saw something their owners couldn't. Visitors told their own stories. A guest staying in the house swore he was woken at 3 a.m. by the sound of tires skidding across gravel outside. When he looked through the window, he saw nothing but the empty driveway, yet the smell of gasoline was so strong it choked him. Another renter claimed she heard footsteps circling the barn for nearly an hour, slow and steady, like a man pacing in thought. When she finally looked, the only thing she saw was a faint glow of cigarette smoke drifting upward into the night. The legend grew in the valley. Some said McQueen had never left because the ranch was where he was happiest, among his cars, his tools, his solitude. Others whispered it wasn't happiness that bound him there, but a restless spirit, a man who lived too fast to ever truly slow down, even in death. And so the Santa Paula Ranch sits in uneasy silence. The pastures grow, the barn stands, but when the night is deep and the valley quiet, the hum of an unseen engine cuts through the dark. A wrench drops against concrete. A shadow moves where no man should be. Steve McQueen, the king of cool, still working, still pacing, still caught in the engines of the dark. Loretta Lynn's haunted Tennessee plantation. Country music legend Loretta Lynn owned the Hurricane Mills Ranch in Tennessee, a sprawling plantation with a mansion dating back to the mid-1800s. While fans visited for concerts and tours, few realized that the place was infamous for ghost sightings. Loretta herself often spoke openly about her paranormal encounters there. Guests reported hearing the sounds of soldiers marching on the grounds, as if Civil War troops still patrolled the land. Doors in the old mansion would slam on their own, even when locked. Loretta's own children once woke in the night screaming that a woman in a long dress had been standing at the foot of their beds, silently watching them. Loretta claimed that the plantation carried the weight of tragedy. Deaths during the Civil War, enslaved people who suffered there, and later drownings in the nearby river. She described nights when she would hear ghostly weeping echoing through the halls, so vivid that she believed the spirits were reliving their sorrow in front of her. To this day, Hurricane Mills is known not just as a country music landmark, but as one of the most haunted celebrity ranches in America. A place where music, history, and restless spirits are permanently intertwined. Elvis Presley's Circle G Ranch. In the late 1960s, Elvis Presley purchased the Circle G Ranch in Mississippi as a private escape from fame. What should have been a peaceful retreat quickly turned into something far more unsettling. Locals whispered that the land itself was cursed long before Elvis. It had been the site of violent disputes, deaths, and unmarked graves. Workers at the ranch reported strange activity almost immediately. Lights flickering in barns, animals reacting to unseen presences, and shadows moving along the tree line when no one was there. Elvis himself supposedly confided to close friends that he sometimes felt as though he wasn't alone in the house. He spoke of a cold figure standing in doorways, watching him, and admitted to waking in the night with the sensation of being pinned down by invisible hands. Ranch staff later said that Elvis avoided certain rooms entirely, especially after hearing phantom footsteps pacing the halls. Even after his death, visitors to the Circle G claimed to experience the same disturbances. Ghostly lights on the grounds, male voices singing when the ranch is empty, and the unmistakable sound of heavy boots walking across creaky floors. For fans, it's become part of Elvis's myth, but for those who worked there, the ranch was never a sanctuary, only a haunted stage where the king himself felt powerless. Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch. No celebrity estate has carried as much myth and unease as Neverland Ranch, Michael Jackson's infamous retreat in Santa Barbara County. Built to be a dreamland filled with rides, animals, and fairy tale architecture, it instead became a place of deep controversy and, according to many, lingering spirits. Even while Jackson was alive, staff reported unsettling experiences. Music boxes playing on their own, carousel rides powering up without electricity, and shadows darting between the oak trees at night. Guests occasionally claimed they heard children laughing in the empty park, long after everyone had gone to bed. After Jackson's death in 2009, those who entered the property described an overwhelming presence, as though the entire ranch was alive with restless energy. Some spoke of apparitions in the theater, where Michael once screened movies for friends and children, while others heard footsteps in the upstairs halls of the main house. A few even swore they saw Michael himself, appearing in windows or near the gates, as though unwilling to leave his kingdom behind. Neverland was eventually sold off, its rides dismantled, its grounds quieted. But those who have been near it since say the land still feels heavy, charged, as if the ranch is haunted not just by spirits, but by the weight of what happened there. In the end, Neverland remains a place that can never fully shed its ghosts.